Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, friends from across the world. My name is Chandra Govindarajulu. I'm the practice manager for ESMAP, the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program, which is a facility at the World Bank that provides upstream support to client countries in developing energy solutions, primarily focusing on energy access, reaching energy access by 2030, and also advancing decarbonization. So as part of this, hydropower has always been at the heart of banks' energy transition strategy. It is, as you know, it ranks as one of the lowest cost sources for electricity for our consumers. We have been in this for a long time. Over the last 20 years, the World Bank has supported over 130 projects in over 60 countries. And it is also an important part of our sister organization, IFC, and also at MEGA, where it is 70% of energy, MEGA's support for energy is in hydropower. Recently, we have renewed our commitment to hydropower, in part due to the fact that globally the interest in hydropower seems to be waning a little bit, and they're not meeting the needs that are there globally. It is also estimated that by 2030, that 20% of the global hydropower infrastructure will be over 55 years old and in need of modernization and rehabilitation. That is an issue that causes a bit of a concern. So we are in this to revive. Of course, hydropower increasingly, as we see it, is important for energy from an energy transition perspective. The client countries that are focused on energy transition want to integrate more clean energy, and that is possible. More integration of a variable renewable energy is possible with the help of hydropower. So that brings the storage aspect of hydropower is so valuable from that perspective. So in this webinar, which is going to be, we will be discussing the hybrid hydropower and how that can increase the generation of clean energy, and also how it brings other benefits such as sustainable utilization of a site, economy of scale, and reduction in the transmission cost. So our new report on the topic, Power of Flexibility, Facilitating the Energy Transition with Hybrid Hydropower Solutions, goes into the various different projects, hybrid hydropower projects, showcasing some of the projects. In fact, we have some of the speakers here who are implementing such projects. Also happy to see that IHA is here, as well as the International Energy Agency is here. So with that, I will turn it over to Ellen to conduct the session now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chandra. Now we will go over to a short presentation, but before we do that, a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions, please put your questions in our Q&A box, and we will answer them during the session. And if we manage not to answer them during the session, we will follow up afterwards with emails. So I would now like to give the floor over to Bente Brunnes to present the report. Over to you, Bente.
Thank you so much, Ellen. First of all, I would also like to welcome everybody to the launch of this report today. To begin, let's have a quick look at the numbers, the challenges for the power system, and what role hydropower hybrids can play. As we are familiar with, the IEA predicted variable renewable energy generation will increase its share on the power system, reaching 25% in 2028. While increasing VRE is a vital step for the energy transition, it will have implications for the power system, given the challenge it poses to maintaining the balance. To better understand and anticipate this challenge, the IEA has also delineated different phases of VRE integration. And this resulting framework helps us understand the flexibility required to balance the system in these different phases. At present, most countries and regions are in phase 1 and 2. And some countries have advanced to and beyond phase 3, where the need for flexibility becomes a priority. And also in this phase, it's where VRE begins to have an influence on power system balance. And how it is a difference, though, between what kind of system you're already operating in. So say if you are in a robust power system, you will have a slower rate of progressing through the phases compared to a region or system where you lack this well-established or resilient power system infrastructure. So what is worth noting then is that for both these different types of systems, it is that VRE integration will at one point require more investment in infrastructure with the sole objective of balancing the power system. And it also gives you the opportunity to evaluate if you fully utilize and maximize the benefits of the solutions that you already have available. Furthermore, this does give us the opportunity to investigate the distinct capabilities of renewable energy technologies and to scale up with the objective to scale up and sustain high shares of variable renewable energy. This also brings us to why we should consider hydropower hybrids. And I think that we're all aware that standalone hydropower plants and other technologies can help manage the variability of VRE in the power system. However, when you have increasing shares, there is also a growing importance of understanding the advantages of managing this variability before it is injected to the power system. Or you can also explore solutions for how you use hydropower as a dedicated resource to manage the variability on the grid. But it motivates us to explore further and more in detail how we can leverage these technological solutions and harness these complementarities to extract these operational synergies with VRE and also with energy storage to deliver these energy services that meet these different objectives that we can see now. So with energy services, we refer to energy control, energy storage, and energy generation. To take one of these is energy control, which is mastered by utilizing the technologies that can balance the disturbances. The synergies between all of these different technologies are harnessed through coordinated management and control. All of these services contribute in its own and also in cooperation towards meeting different objectives. So if you would like to seek and to figure out how to provide a stable and short-term, long-term power supply to the power system, it is an option to explore how you maximize energy generation from VRE, and then you dedicate your hydropower resource to balance this power output and also to balance energy generation in the long term to secure this energy balance across, for example, a year. Another option is to have a fast responding system where you can use either fast response hydropower, or if the site allows for, you can also combine it with battery energy storage solutions. However, we are aware that multiple factors and also different combinations influence the design of a hybrid, and that in turn influence its ability to deliver these services to best meet these objectives. Which brings us to our next slide. This This figure and this framework is intended to guide you towards identifying solutions that can hold the greatest potential. It is always necessary to explore the relationship between the technologies, how the interactions and how they act on their own, both provides and delivers energy services, but also in terms of how they support the power system. It is intended to be used as a guide to be able to place your selected technology into this grid, and then you can also better understand how it will act in these different parameters. For example, one is, of course, fast response hydropower, and it can be dedicated towards providing energy control, but it also acts towards supporting energy storage. But for the power system, it does support mainly the first metric here with power outputs and power balance. Another example is, of course, how long duration energy service in the storage, such as the reservoirs, is primarily, of course, an energy storage function that works on the long-term time scale and so on. We can dive a bit more deeper into how energy generation works, or how you also seek to evaluate the different resources with the objective of securing it in the long term as well. It is important to be aware that the interdependencies between renewable resources become more prominent as the interconnectivity in power systems increase. One example is how the complementarities and variability could either lead to unintended consequences in regions with very similar weather conditions, or it can also offer great advantage in larger regions where the differences in weather conditions can support and complement each other. This can give you the opportunity to making a long-term balance that is more reliable, that can also boost energy security as resources in different regions could complement each other. Further, increased interconnectivity also makes it possible to explore how energy services can build this flexibility. It can also alleviate constraints in some areas of the system, but it can also give us the opportunity to focus investments or expansions on areas that require strengthening. So to comprehensively understand how hydropower hybrid energy generation can help ensure energy balance, both in the short and long term, it is necessary to explore how the interplay between seasonality and variability in both water, solar, and wind resources act and work alongside each other, and also how these work alongside shifts in power demand. So if you live in a northern hemisphere, you can experience, of course, that there is an increased need for heating during winter, less so during summer. And how does that then act in turn with increased solar generation during summer? We're now going to move forward to exploring a bit more about what kind of benefits you can obtain from hybrids. These are, of course, listed on many, and we already have discussed today. But what many of these contribute to is the opportunity to achieve economies of scale. One of them is, of course, that you have the cost minimization effect via using shared infrastructure, project preparation activities, and other organizational resources that can span from early project development phases through operation and maintenance. Furthermore, if you have a hybrid facility that's injecting power to the grid in one connection point and before the connection point, you can also have these additional sets of benefits. One of most is, of course, that you can supply high quality power before it is injected. It gives you the opportunity to utilize the site's fullest potential. So say you already have or you're developing a hydropower site, you can utilize the already purchased and acquired land to be able to generate more energy from other sources. This can and may in turn lower impacts on biodiversity and ecosystems, and could potentially then leave more nature either untouched or available for other uses. So compared with standalone plants, the reduced land requirements of hybrids can contribute to not only environmental conservation, but also significant savings in land acquisition cost. As you may expect, when you start combining multiple technologies, you also introduce a new layer of complexity. This is an element that needs to be managed across the lifespan of the project, but as a number of technologies grow, it becomes a challenge to prioritize tools and harmonize both the resource utilization, how it's best utilized to deliver these energy services, and how you prioritize which energy source, for example, to generate from. This can, then coupled with hydropower, this can also be influenced by other priorities that are set for example, water resource management by providing water from either irrigation or for potable water. So I think that exploring these challenges are necessary so that we can acknowledge and also further grasp what's needed in terms of innovation and research to meet these future flexibility demands. It is necessary to build methodologies and analytical tools for countries and regions for understanding how hybrids can act and deliver, and how you can also tailor them to meet regions and countries' specific needs. Another aspect that needs more development is, of course, how you can foster energy services. Because one of the main challenges for realizing the energy transition is the availability of bankable projects. And so also applies to the availability of bankable hybrid projects. As one can observe from this figure, countries do have regularly and do also assess the flexibility of power system, but it is more work to do so. So from one perspective, governments must explore and develop further how they can support renewable technologies via integration and development of hybrids, for both on a policy, legal, and regulatory frameworks. But they must also explore how they can foster energy services through remuneration or market mechanisms. And there are some regions that have advanced towards developing more different types of mechanisms for remunerating this. And one, of course, is to bring forth is India, and which is also why we're joined by two experts from that country today that we're much more look forward to listen to soon. Another one is also from EU, and I bring in EU because it is interesting to see that the commonalities between these two regions is that they both acknowledge variable renewables impact on the system, and they both work towards developing a framework that supports this to incentivize the energy transition, but also to secure energy security and affordability in the long term. There are, of course, nuances and differences in how they go about that. So to conclude, hydropower hybrids are a promising solution because they provide highly sought after energy services. However, scaling up projects will be challenging without adequate remuneration for energy services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bente. Yes, like Bente mentioned, we are here with 4 distinguished panelists that will join us for a discussion on how hydropower hybrids. We have here Eddie Rich, the CEO of International Hydropower Association, Prasad Joshi, the head of development at Greenco AM Group, Atle Harby, who has many hats here today, which is a senior research scientist at Sintef, but also part as at the IHA Hydro. And then my colleague Surbhi Goya, a senior energy specialist at the World Bank, working in South Asia region. Now, I would like to start with Eddie and ask Eddie to tell us a little bit about the International Hydropower Association, but also, since you have a global perspective, what do you observe as the most significant obstacle developing and implementing hybrid hydropower, and how can they be addressed or mitigated to scale up the number of projects?
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Congratulations to the World Bank. Great report, very important report, very timely given the challenges that we're facing in the energy transition. I mean, IHA, which I'm the CEO, we are the global voice for sustainable hydropower. We represent over 100 companies from around the world in the hydropower sector. So that's developers and operators, it's manufacturers and suppliers, and it's also the consultant community and the designers of the structure. And as I say, we're very focused on the sustainability of hydropower and trying to lift the whole voice of the role that it can play, awareness it can play in the energy transition. So this report is very relevant for the kind of messages that we want to get out, make sure that hydropower is no longer the sort of ignored giant in the room when it comes to energy. I think in terms of obstacles, Ellen, the report, and Bente has spoken very clearly about the huge benefits that exist. You can really extend the lifetime of hydropower plants by, for example, adding batteries, and they can be quite small batteries, but they can really significantly improve ramping up and ramping down. And of course, when it comes to floating solar, we know the sort of cooling properties of putting solar on reservoirs, especially if they're double-sided. So this is really important technology in the hybridization. So why isn't it happening anyway? Why isn't the market delivering? And here I think I would like to highlight 3 points, particularly when it comes to batteries, and then I'll come on to something on 1 point on solar. On batteries, I think the key challenge is around rewarding flexibility. And that, I often say, the market is great at being able to reward people when, you switch on the light, you pay for the electricity. It's not so clever at rewarding for knowing the lights are going to come on. It's that reliability, it's that balance, it's that efficiency. Markets can't really deal with that. So it needs government intervention. And that's real frontier economics. And the examples that Bente gave from India, from Europe, where the government has carefully and cleverly intervened into liberalized markets to tweak the incentives. We need to learn a lot from that, and that we're just at the beginning of the journey, and it's really important that the World Bank and others really can play such a crucial role in helping governments along that journey. Secondly, and Bente made this point as well, these are complex business models, right? I mean, just like we always say in hydropower, every site is different, every region is different, every market is different. And so when you're talking about putting in batteries with hydropower, these can be a vastly different set of cases. You can have batteries playing very different roles. You can have still very different size of batteries, very different size of hydropower plant. How they interact with each other is complex. There isn't a boilerplate solution. I mean, I wouldn't want to go too far in suggesting that solar power, for example, is a boilerplate, but at the end of the day, it's pretty modular. You bring your solar panels along, and you can build and expand. It's not like that in this case, and that's difficult for investors. And thirdly, when it comes to battery and hydro flexibility, there's the risk perception. I mean, this is a new technology. And hybridization and in new technology is inherently risky. And these will be volatile prices. This will be unproven technologies and how they interact. We're still learning that journey. There's skills that still need to be developed and training. So all of that needs to be taken into model. And if I may just quickly, Ellen, just finish with the point about floating solar, because I think here the market is going to work better, it's going to work a bit faster. We've seen the potential, and that is ramping up fast. But at the end of the day, it is, of course, in most cases, more expensive to build floating solar than it is to build it on the ground. And that means that it, again, is site specific. It may need a little bit of assistance to get it up and running as an accepted technology, and then learning the best technology to make that really work to maximum optimization. So yeah, bit of work still to do, but we're on this is an important report, and World Bank have got a key role. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ati. Now we will go over to Prasad, who is representing, who is working for Greenco and AN Group, and they are doing some Giga project in India. So if you could tell us a little bit about Greenco and AN Group, but also what value and lesson learned valuable lesson can be learned from your integrated renewable energy project, particularly in terms of its success, challenges, and what is important to be to learn from, to inform for future projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. I mean, thanks World Bank for pulling out this project report. I mean, this report is phenomenal. It is educational for a lot of people across the world who are actually trying to venture into hydro. Now, let me just give a brief background of Greenco and AM Green Group. So Greenco Group formed with only one objective in mind, with producing green power. And we started with small hydro, then graduated into the wind and solar. While we're doing all this, we slowly built up roughly 7.5 gigawatt of assets amongst all these 3 different platforms. One thing we realize is none of these renewable sources are offering the flexibility, or rather they are more rigid on when we put them on a grid. Now, more and more renewable power you add, more and more rigid grid is going to be. I mean, you need something like gas power to offer the flexibility. Unfortunately, in India, where we don't have access to such a massive gas power, where we need to provide flexibility to some sort of a hydropower. I mean, that's the only solution which India can possibly have. And that was the birth of our first integrated renewable project. And when we started with first very small concept of building 1200. Slowly, we soon got into the actual design of the system. Then we realized that we don't need 8, 10, or 15 hours of storage. We at India level, we need more like a 6 hours of storage, where we have ability to integrate solar, wind, and pump storage together. The entire concept came from the fact that we actually need to gate crash the timelines of hydropower project, because we ourselves are having roughly 2 gigawatt of hydro assets under our belt. One of the predominant challenge in any hydro project is getting approvals, environmental clearances. When we started developing this project, we realized that if we have something which is completely off grid, completely off stream, closed loop system, that is when we can treat it differently, and we can actually gate crash all those timelines. So we are actually going to build this project in a span of about 3 to 4 years. We started back in 2019. This first project is now 1680 megawatt, 6 hours of storage, roughly 10 gigawatt hour of gigantic battery, which is getting developed in southern part of India, called as Kurnool area. And that project is called as Pinnapuram 1680 Integrated Power Project. This project started back in 2019. Thereafter, COVID actually had the biggest intervention in this project. I mean, that was one of the, if you want to ask me what is a major hurdle, that was one of the biggest hurdle. I mean, that during that time, we lost a lot of time on actual site work. And this pump storage and all these hydro projects are essentially the lot of site work, lot of construction activities which are happening at site. It was a time first we thought that our electromechanical components can be delayed, but because of COVID, they actually came online faster because the work was happening in the factories, but work was not actually happening at site. So one of the delay which happened because of COVID was on the civil side, and then eventually we ramped up, because one of the advantage of civil as well is that if you put more manpower, you can actually get things done faster. So that is how we, once the COVID was behind us, we actually started putting more and more manpower to accelerate the things. And now we are seeing this project will get commissioned by July, or maybe latest by September this year. That will be the first of its kind in India. And this whole 1680 megawatt project will actually help us decarbonizing various industries, some of the steel plants, some of the aluminum plant. We are actually looking at producing green hydrogen and green ammonia as well using this power. And one of the unique contract which we signed with our government of India is peak and off-peak power contract, where we'll actually utilize the solar power in off-peak periods, store it in this pump storage, and dispatch on-demand basis to our distribution companies in a peak time zone. So that is how we are actually trying to utilize this massive storage capacity to offer the flexibility on the grid. And when I mentioned that we are actually going to produce green hydrogen, green ammonia with this, that is a birth of a new entity called as AIM Green. AIM Green is going to completely focus on green molecules, green hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, and sustainable aviation fuel. And one of the backbone of this company is obviously going to be the storage. And what we are trying to do, we are trying to achieve this solar, wind, and hydro storage to run our electrolyzers around 85 to 90% PLF. We are not taking a risk on any of the PEM or SOEC or any of these new high-tech electrolyzers, but we are going old way. We are going to bank on the robust technology of alkaline electrolyzer, and that's when we actually partner with a company like John Cockle, who is actually going to build Gigafactory along with us in India. Our plan is to build 2 gigawatt factory in southern part of India, where we are actually going to utilize these electrolyzers to make green hydrogen and ammonia. And I'm actually proud to say that we are one of the first company out of India to sign offtake agreement with German utility. That is in a public domain. We sign a contract with Uniper to export green ammonia, which is RFNBO compliant, which is actually better in terms of the temporal correlation, because we can actually match 15 minutes basis compared to the requirement of Europe at 1 hour. So yeah, I mean, that is how we are actually getting into this green hydrogen space, utilizing this storage.
Thank you, Prasad. It's a very interesting project and in a gigawatt scale. If we go a little bit over, take a little bit different terms and go to Atle. Atle, you are working for EAA Hydro, part of the EAA Hydro group. If you could tell us a little bit about that, and could you also tell us what are the advantages with hybrid hydropower, and what does this differentiate from other renewable energy solutions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena, and thank you all of you for having me here. Yes, IEA Hydro, it's so-called a technology collaboration program that all the different technologies that IEA, the International Energy Agency based in Paris, are dealing with, has such programs. So it's basically governments that, for instance, for the IEA Hydro are engaged in hydropower that sign up for this. And within that group, we try to take up what we call tasks or actions to work on that are quite relevant for the future of hydropower. For instance, things like valuing hydropower services, looking into the benefits of flood control and drought management that hydropower gives, etc. Looking into some of the challenges with new operation of hydropower, with combining with other flexibility resources, and how to manage that in a climate change scope, etc. And we have recently also started to work on hydropower hybrids, so it's very timely that the report from the World Bank is out now, and we're happy to see some of the highlights there. So from the from the work we have done and also from research we see of course a lot of advantages, as is highlighted in this report, on hybridization of hydropower to meet the demands of energy control, energy services, energy storage that we will be facing enormously in the future in the energy transition. And of course, the benefits is quite highlighted as well in this report, and we clearly see that the advantages like reducing the land use if you're combining things, combining infrastructure, and especially also the better management of resources, whether it's hydropower combined with batteries to reduce wear and tear, or if it's more like trying to deliver a much more constant flow of energy when needed by combining, for instance, wind or solar with hydropower that has its flexibility. There are huge opportunities. I think one of the main challenges on this is rather to get a good energy management system. Well, it's been highlighted already that there are a couple of other obstacles. It may be more costly, but there are also large benefits, and making them work together with a good energy management and control system that actually optimizes the resources, whether it's hydropower and a battery, or hydropower and solar, or hydropower and wind, all the renewables. It's a new way of thinking to optimize them together. So I think that's also what we see from the work in IEA Hydro and the interest around the world on this. We have participation from all over the world, all continents, and they're all actually all facing the same thing, whether it's different from site to site, as also highlighted here, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, whether it's battery you combine, but it's always taking out even more benefit from the combination of this is the key thing to look at. So thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Atli. Now, Surbi, now you're a World Bank, so I will not ask you to present give us your presentation about the World Bank. But can you explain to us about some of the potential solution for integrating existing hydropower project in supporting of variable renewable energy integration, and what are the challenges and opportunities that constrain this space?
Sure. Thank you so much, Eileen, and thank you so much for all the panelists, because I think it has laid the base very nicely for some of the interventions that are being asked in the question. So, I just wanted to start with a very peculiar example from India. I don't know how many of you have heard about it, but during COVID times in 2020, our Prime Minister had made an announcement that there would be a light outs event for 9 minutes. And India being a huge economy with 120 gigawatts of peak demand at that point in time during COVID times when industries and other, commercial bases were all shut down, it was a huge demand, still to handle. And 9 minutes light out would mean that there would be a dip in the demand, right? And we saw a dip of 32 gigawatts over 4 minutes of time. What came to the rescue? There was no power failure, nothing at all. The only thing that came to the rescue was hydropower projects. So it vouches itself for the flexibility, the ramp-up capabilities, the black start capabilities, and whatnot that Bente covered in the presentation. So hydropower does present a huge opportunity for us. However, at least in India, and I am seeing elsewhere also, it is being like a lost lawn kind of technology because of the challenges that it has, of course, but there are solutions to handle. So how do we, I would say, finesse our communications strategy around it, specifically in the social and environmental also plays an important role along with the surveys, etc., and the in-depth assessments that are being done. But coming to the question that how we can actually integrate the existing hydropower projects, there are certain solutions, and some of them have been covered in the previous remarks by the panelists also. I think very important that whatever power plants that we have at the moment, how can we leverage on them? One of the panelists spoke about the battery solutions. We are trying to install batteries, but at the moment, the commercial utility is up to 4 hours. However, some of the run-of-the-river hydropower projects, even though they don't have huge pondage, but they still store water for 1 to 3 hours or up to 4 hours also. How can we leverage on that? At the moment in India, at least, and I'm seeing across other countries also, barring few, the water stored in the hydropower projects are not being valued. and hence they are being used as any other generation project, which is what is hampering the usage of the water, which is a water battery, so to say, in these reservoirs, in these hydropower projects. So one opportunity that could probably exist is that how we can attach value to these stored water through, regulations, through policy interventions, and through some of the interventions like virtual power plant, how we can bring together the existing hydropower projects and solar, wind, not necessarily co-located, but somewhere else in the system. India is a one huge national grid, and it's all integrated by, a very dense network. How can we bring all these available solar projects, wind projects, which don't have PPA, and then we take it forward, bundle it, and meet a given consumer's offtake demand? If we are able to prove at least the first demonstration of this kind of bundling, it will be very helpful, because what is happening, as one of the other panelists also mentioned, that over the time, hydropower projects are becoming increasingly expensive. So standalone hydropower projects as an offtake agreement may not, be a good argument for the off-takers to buy. So how do we bring hydropower as a support to the other variable renewable energy like solar and wind, which are much cheaper, will be very, very, very important. On top of it, one of the panelists also spoke about the floating solar and how we can use the hydropower reservoirs for that. I think that's a very good opportunity as well. However, floating solar, as the co-panelist mentioned, that is relatively expensive as compared to the ground mounted. However, if you look at very specific, country-related requirements, in India, we are now the most populous country. The opportunity cost of land is huge. We don't have barren lands. So how do we, still expand and meet our energy needs using RE? And hence there is floating solar, which makes a promising sense. We are starting from the irrigation reservoirs, but then hydropower project authorities themselves are also thinking that how such hydropower projects be utilized for installation of floating solar. However, there was a question in the chat where one of the audience had asked about the difficulties and the regulations to install additional equipment. I think regulatory requirements are very important, because most of these assets which are sector state-owned require to go through regulations to get the regulatory approvals, to get the tariff and the revenue related to it. But also it needs a lot of intervention on the regulatory side to understand and appreciate the value that hydro can bring onto the table. So a lot of moving parts in the system. In India, a lot of value is being attached to hydro now. There has been a lot of thrust on the hydropower projects. There are hydropower purchase obligations that have been introduced, which have not yet become effective, but going to become effective very soon. So these all are the steps in the direction that how we can bring more and more hydropower to the center stage and use it more to support RE through various hybrid solutions, as well as to support to support the variable renewable energy with or without a direct contract with other PPAs. I can go on for another many more minutes, but I'll take a pause and I can reflect later on some of the remarks from the audience and from the other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. I will now like to go back to Eddie and ask him about how can hybrid hydropower be effectively advanced on a global scale, considering diverse market regulatory?
Well, Ellen, to paraphrase Bill Clinton, it's the market stupid. I mean, we need to make sure that we are working with policymakers to get the signals right for major investment. I'd say there are 5 parts to this. First of all, policymakers really need to plan ahead for a balanced grid. If you just wait for wind and solar to come onto the market, and then you find you've got a problem with variability, then it's too late. Not least because hydropower takes a long time to build. It's usually quite big infrastructure, and that's not going to be turned around in a year when you go through licensing and design and feasibility and financial approvals. Secondly, we need to identify the projects and the models that we were talking about, the right mix of this hybridization, and do the feasibility. And this includes, and this is the point which was made in the audience, about modernization. You know, there is, if you take all the potential greenfield sites, particularly on pump storage, and you take modernization, there's plenty of sites around the world before you even need to touch a river again. And I think we get almost paralyzed by the thought of, oh, okay, this is that there isn't enough sites. The evidence, the atlases are very clear, and if anybody wants more information on where it's possible to build, then we'd be pleased to get in touch. And then the third side is the most important: build the right sort of financial and market mechanisms to ensure that flexibility, the balance, and storage is properly recognized and rewarded, so that investors can know that they will get not just a return on it, but a return over the long term. They will be able to see that visibility, not just in short spells, but over a guaranteed return, minimum return over a longer period. And then fourthly, we all have to work very hard on streamlining licensing, making sure, not shortcutting, but actually making sure that we have sensible policies in place and standardization of acceptance and approval mechanisms, including the World Bank's own financial mechanisms, to make sure that we can get regulation, financial approval, engagement with communities, all done at the same point. And I do want to pick up on that one final point, and Subi mentioned it, and I think it's really important. We are coming off the back of a legacy issue, a reputational issue. People went off hydropower at some point around the turn of the century, and that has put us in a very bad position for the energy transition. We need to work on the perception and practice of the sector. We need to do better, and that's not talking to the policymakers. That's us in industry. We need to do a better job, and we have committed to the Hydropower Sustainability Standard. We expect all our members to certify all new projects against the Hydropower Sustainability Standard. And the Hydropower Sustainability Standard is independent of us. It is a independently run standards with governments, companies, civil society, and financial institutions such as the World Bank involved. So if we can show that going forward, the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower, and that is demonstrably and independently proved, then we will go a long way to repairing the reputation, so that hydropower can play its big role in with hybridization. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Eddie. You came on a very important point. Now, Prasad, I think you partly answered my next question, but maybe if you could elaborate a little bit about the benefits you have experienced from the project, but also maybe what are your future plans with both in India, or are you going elsewhere with these hybrid projects that you have?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I partly touch. I mean, when we actually started this pump storage project, our initial thought was, how can we give round-the-clock power to most of the industries which are actually hard to decarbonize. I mean, we haven't seen any plant which is running on renewable power, so your steel plant, aluminum smelter, even cement plants. So they never been put on any of these renewable, because renewable is being intermittent. So when we started offering this solution, solar, wind, and pump storage hybrid, I mean, that is when most of the people got confidence that, okay, fine, we can run this plant. When annually we can get something like 85 and 90% PLFs. And most important is, nobody in India, trust me, nobody in India will ever sign just because this power is green. Okay, I mean, we need to be on cost competitive. So when our power actually touch almost equal to their existing power prices with complete green, that is when the clock actually turned for us. And that is when most of these industries started signing PPAs with us. that time we realized that why can't we utilize this power to actually decarbonize the sector, which is even harder to decarbonize, such as refinery. And that is when this whole birth of AM Green came, and we actually started building a factory for electrolyzer. And that is when we said that, okay, we can make hydrogen at the lowest possible cost in the world, because we are actually looking at combining this power, which is much cost effective than any other resource in the world. And because we are running these alkaline electrolyzers at 90% PLF, we are essentially giving electrolyzers as a kind of a base load. And that is when we are making this hydrogen almost continuously generated. So we don't need to store the hydrogen, we can store electricity much effectively than hydrogen. And that is when we are actually going to run our ammonia plant on a 90% base load. And that is what we are looking at, producing green ammonia, even the methanol and a sustainable aviation fuel. So this has actually opened completely different element of a business for us. And that is when we got a separate set of investors. We actually announced the new investment, which will be almost 4 to 5 million ton of ammonia, green ammonia venture, where most of the oil and gas giant have actually invested money in this. So this whole hydropower, I mean, we should not look at hydropower as a base hydro. We should look at this hydro, how can it offer a multi-dimensional opportunity to decarbonize sector, which is even hard to decarbonize. And just to tell you, our plans in India are, after this first project, we're actually building almost we call cloud energy platform. We are actually going to have 8 projects of this scale, maybe 10 to 20 gigawatt hour each. And all of them are connected on our central grid, which is one of the most digitized grid. Why I'm saying digitized grid is this grid can actually give matching of the energy source to the utilization almost on a 15-minute basis. So this whole 100 gigawatt hour cloud storage platform, what we are building, is going to be online by 2030. And that will actually give a completely different outlook to this whole decarbonization of the various sectors, along with production of these green molecules. Yeah, I mean, that's the future what we are looking at.
Thank you very much. It's one of the most interesting projects I have at least come across lately. But Atle, what primary areas for research would you recommend focusing for developing and implementing hybrid hydropower to go forward?
Thank you for that question. I think I would like to pick up on first what Eddie said, that we need to look carefully into the environmental impacts and potential benefits of combining hydropower with other sources. It's not only with the reduced land use perhaps, but also with this shared infrastructure. These things are quite obvious, but we have to look into also what is the gain, for instance, of doing for instance, floating solar or actually having these things next to each other. We all know that the biodiversity is under threat, and the main reason for that is actually land use. And if we can do that in an effective way, but we have to find new ways. When you should, for instance, start with an existing hydropower plant and then hybridize with something new, or if you start in a greenfield project, it's a little bit different ways of looking at it, and we need to both learn from those projects that are being realized and then look more into research on this. And another issue which I think is really important is to develop kind of optimization tools for the operation of such hybrid systems and the energy management, both to meet the short-term and long-term flexibility needs. So we have to have power on 24/7 and all year round. So looking into the possibilities we now have with perhaps also taking new things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, using the data we are collecting in real time to optimize systems much better. That is also a very good way of kind of making a more efficient system. And I think we have done a lot of research already on single things, how to optimize one wind farm, one solar PV park, one hydropower plant, but we have not done this really together. So I think there are some research questions to look into there. And maybe a third thing as well, and this is kind of kind of little bit broader scope, we have to look really into what will the energy system look like in the future. We know there's a massive energy transition, and how can we meet those demands? And we need to meet them both today and tomorrow, but also the day after tomorrow. So, I mean, having this perspective of both short-term and long-term perspective needs maybe that we develop flexible solutions, that there can be add-ons and changes with time. This will be very necessary to have an effective system which works both in 2024 and 2030 and 2040. And we don't really know how these things looks together. So that's of course something that is also on the research agenda in general for energy system researchers, but I don't think they're aware of the hybrid solution. So we have to bring that to the table as well. So I think that's my things we would like to do more in research about. So thank you.
Thank you, Atle. Surbi, what is the World Bank doing in supporting our client country in some of these discussed hybrid hydropower solutions?
I just was very curious when I was listening to Atle. Atle, so you mentioned that you have not studied all these technologies together. I think you may have a beginner kind of a pack from India coming up very soon. So we are working with Himachal Pradesh, and if many of you don't know, India has this northern area where we have Himalayas, and we have a couple of hilly states there which are very rich in hydropower projects. So we are working with one of such states called Himachal Pradesh, and there we are working with them to see that how an existing hydropower project, for instance, can be utilized and bundled with other variable RE. And again, as I mentioned in my previous remarks, they need not be in the same location, and they could be anywhere in the grid. How can we bring the generation profiles of these various projects or these various generation technologies, match them up to match the consumer offtake? So we are also in the process of, getting an aggregator. The client, Himachal Pradesh government, is getting an aggregator which will do all this kind of work, which will bring together these various generation resources, solar, wind, and then to see that where the hydropower project will play a better role. Because again, we need to be very cognizant of the fact that hydro is seasonal in nature. It need not be available throughout the year. So how do we bundle this project so that we continue to meet the requirements of the off-taker throughout the year as per their demand curves, but also to bring the various other issues that other colleagues just mentioned, for instance, energy management system, the inbuilding of artificial intelligence, machine learning to predict and forecast how the power projects are going to react, where would still be certain pockets left which will not be met by either solar or wind or hydro. Then should we have to tap into the real-time markets, or we have to tap into a smaller battery storage? All this is being chalked out as we are speaking at the moment, and we have done base work already. We engaged one of the very hands-on not consulting firm, but a trading firm to help us stitch together the benefits of this particular engagement. And now we are proceeding towards the implementation stage. It can provide a blueprint for hydropower projects in the future, not only within the hilly states, but across the country, as well as for the interregional interconnections between Nepal, Bhutan, India, etc. So it has a huge replication effect. So that is the first thing. The second that we are attempting to do is to install floating solar projects. We are working with a couple of very well-known entities at the central level, for instance, Solar Energy Corporation of India, to install floating solar in one of the irrigation reservoirs. We are supporting other entities which own multi-purpose reservoirs in the state of Kerala and Madhya Pradesh to see that where all floating solar can come up. We are also working with some hydropower project companies like SJVN, etc., to explore that how they want to do floating solar in their hydropower projects, and how we can bring more synergies and more lessons from the irrigation reservoirs to replicate on the hydropower projects. What are the additional complications that they're likely to face, and what else that is required to be done so it's competitive? And it will again bring together the policy regulatory challenges, which one of the audience questions were about. The last is that what Eddie mentioned about the hydro sustainability standards. So Eddie, we are also trying to use that as a base in our engagement in Himachal Pradesh to see that how the hydropower projects across the basin can become more robust, early warning systems, and a lot of other things, devil lies in the detail out there, so that the entire resource planning can be done in a sustainable manner and more friendly manner to avoid any kind of disasters, or at least predict the disaster in advance to avoid loss of life, property, etc. So in the hybrid solution, this is all what we are trying to do. But of course, as we all are, working in this space, this is all a very new technology. It's a good forum to exchange ideas and to keep exchanging such ideas so that we build on each other's experiences, because we are all complementary, to each other in terms of various aspects that we are looking at. Helen, over to you.
Thank you. Ade, you have 10 seconds if you want to comment. We're
Just,
almost running out of
one
time.
final point, listening to everybody, just perhaps put out there, if every time we talk about modernization, we should also be talking about hybridization. There's a huge opportunity. So if that would be my one final takeaway message from my side.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank you all for a very valuable and interesting conversation. And I think we are on a path, and I've also had the opportunity to talk to one of the manufacturer of hydropower equipment, and currently they are seeing a huge increase for hybrid projects, and I think currently 30% of their portfolio is hybrid. So we will see more of this technology, and I hope we are only in the starting phase of this. So thank you all very much, and I would like to thank you all that joined us online, and have a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.